Hi everyone. So I'm bringing Kolade back because there's just so much I'm unpacking with Kolade, and I'm enjoying the conversations I'm having with you. And I'll really like for everyone to, learn one or two things, like I said, from you as the subject matter expert, right? So right now, let's talk about setting up businesses abroad as migrants. So, what are the legalities around setting up a business abroad? I know you have a UK perspective to it, but if you have general views on that, please let me know as well. As well as let's talk about maybe the administrative processes. So, what are the legalities, the documentation, and things like that? And then, what are the costs to it to
Mm.
open accounts, running, the initial cost. And if you can even touch on running costs, that would be nice as well.
Mm. Okay. I think there is no straight jacket answer to it, but I'll start from a very generic business mindset. So, coming from Nigeria, where it's actually really rugged, everybody's looking out for selling. So we tend to have a an approach that is African to doing business abroad. I've seen a lot of business owners, fall into that trap without engaging the system and knowing what this new terrain is about, right? So I think it's first of all important to understand the difference in context in terms of, setting up and running the business. Cross-border entrepreneurship is a big topic where you find a lot of talents moving across the globe, and they sort of carry templates from where they're coming from into where they're going to. So I'll speak from the UK perspective, and then I believe this would extend to general popular destination like US, UK, US, Canada.
Mhm.
Number one thing to understand is, as migrants, we need to be very sure, because now we are speaking about the legality of doing the business. We need to be very sure that we are on the right, should I say, visa class to be able to even set up a business in the first place.
Mhm.
That is one key thing I know that the UK is quite big on. There are certain visa restrictions to setting up a business in the UK,
Mm.
which can hinder some people from actually running a business. Number two thing is, considering the market size generally, what can be the potential demand for that product or that service? Because obviously businesses can only be offering a product or a service depending on what the outcome of your business model canvas is saying. That's a different topic, by the way, where you flesh out all the working parts of your business. So look at just try, secondary research will give you some numbers as to the market size, the location where you are domiciled. So for example, popular areas in the UK, London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, um, where else? These are like Birmingham. Yeah, I mentioned Birmingham. These are like the big cities in the UK where you
Yeah.
find a lot of foot traffic, as per a lot of people are there.
Yeah.
Now, you also need to put that into perspective in positioning the business. So again, there are some businesses that can actually, you know, leverage the internet. You don't need to physically be in a particular location. So that's one thing to look at.
Mhm.
Another thing to look at is also, so we are coming from Africa, where the behavioral pattern of buyers are different. We need to get into the groove of knowing the how customers behave generally wherever we are.
Mhm.
The UK people, in my own view, can be very price sensitive. So depending on the class of the customer segments you are targeting, you need to also consider all of that in fixing your price points on your products and your services.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need to consider language, the cultural slants to these things, because again, we are coming from a Nigerians. I feel that our market is one of the most interesting markets in the world. When I mean the most interesting, I mean that it's a ready market. 200 million people is no joke. And you
Yeah.
see, that's one of the reasons why many of these foreign businesses try to make inroads into the Nigerian markets, to be
Yeah.
specific. And that's just because they know that there's a ready market, and obviously outside of Niger, let's say we come to the UK, for example, you are doing retailing, you know that you have a lot of big bones to contend with. We're talking about big retail stores like Asda, Tesco,
Oh, yeah.
Aldi, and all the likes. So it can be a red ocean for businesses that want to, set up using that strategy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've talked about language, culture, consumer behavior, and all of that. So obviously, we've also mentioned visa restriction. Now, the legalities for the UK. So I registered a business in the UK in 2023, sometime around April. And at that time, I know that the cost of registering a business now has increased. I don't know by how many percent, but at the time I was paying for the registration, it was about 11, 12 pounds, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot to actually legalize the registration process. Although so the timeline from, paying the money and then getting your documents can vary. I think between 2 to 4 days, but they are usually really fast with expediting the paperwork and whatnot. As of now, I think I'm as at the last time I inquired about it was about £50. So that is a jump from what it used to be
Yeah.
now. Now, talking about the paper element, banking and the likes, because again, because I remember when I registered the business, there was an address to it. Mind you, Nigerians, please, if you are watching this video, know that abroad is not like Nigeria. So everything has to be, every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed. And I'll tell you a story. So I'd registered the business, had an address on it. Then I actually had two addresses, one in Leeds and the other one in where we live as a family in Hull. And then on the website, I had the Leeds address on it. So for some reasons, the bank reached out to me. I don't know how, because we are talking about company house. Company house is a government entity. They are the ones, it's just like you have CAC in Nigeria. They are the ones in charge of
Setting up.
setting up the business, like all the paperwork associated with business registration and all that. They are the ones in charge. So for some reasons, they reached out, they called me on the phone that, look, there's a disparity, there's a misalignment with what you have on the website and what you have, with company house. And it took me aback because I was just thinking, that means they actually, because that website wasn't public, we hadn't marketed that website. But then they took it upon themselves to do that desk research as to, are these people what they say they are? So again, the legitimacy of what you are doing, you need to be playing your cards facing up. Unlike Nigeria, that a lot of things backdoor, and we know these things. It's not as if we are not pretending about it. Sometimes we try to avoid tax. There are a lot of back end wiring to making sure that your money is complete. But let's leave that culture, that Nigerian culture, back in Nigeria and do business in the right way here. That at least I'll float that as a balloon, as an advice as to conducting business abroad. Now there are tax obligations which essentially you cannot
Shy away from. Yeah.
There are tax obligations that you need to meet as a business person. There's corporation tax. If you have employees, there's what they call NI contributions you need to make. All those things. It's all embodied in, there's, that one is a separate, that is a UK thing. But I'm just being generic with my conversation with taxing and again, there are against what we do in Niger, that we employ a staff, we speak to the staff anyhow, we treat the staff badly, we don't pay them sometimes because maybe we'll say, we didn't sell low.
Minimum wage.
Minimum, thank you.
Mm.
Minimum wage. They call it, well, I think they call it living wage here, but you get the point. So all of that bad tendencies and the fact that we get away with it in Nigeria is not something that you can get away with, especially when you're abroad. So I think that needs to be that needs to be taken into consideration, because
when you're thinking of setting up, because
when you're thinking about,
when you employ staff, you are going to have to pay them according to what their skill is.
to pay them.
Yeah.
Later on in this gist, we are also going to talk about creating a pipeline of opportunities for the business, which I'm going to stay a bit on, just so that we understand, because again, we are coming from a different place, and our strategy to making, accessing the market can be different.
Yeah.
You understand? So we'll deal with that. But so we mentioned tax, we mentioned labor laws and whatnot, and what are the booby traps that we must avoid, because again, we don't want to holler. Now, I've noticed that there are a lot of grants, government grants, financial support for businesses. I tell you what, a lot of all these future forward countries, these popular destinations as you have them, they is a latent, should I call it, desire by the government or by the establishment that they want businesses to thrive, and it's because they understand the impact on economic growth for many businesses in those countries. So you see, in different councils in different areas, they have boards, they have grants, commissions, where they actually give out money to support businesses. Essentially, they are giving businesses oxygen, so that, because inevitably the business succeeds, they're able to take down unemployment rate at the same time, because government alone cannot do it. So they're actually making sure that the businesses are able to succeed, and they provide an environment where they can thrive. So it's an easier environment to do business, to be honest. So talking about building trust, again, this again is connected to accessing the market, because again, being a foreigner, introducing a new product or a new service can be a uphill task, because you are not like them. Face the facts. So to earn that trust, you need to actually build the trust. So it's a lot of work, but I can show you some personal strategies that I used to kind of access the market. Now, another thing we need to also be aware of in 2025 business landscape is that you need to be digitally present. Digital presence, right? You in fact, forget about living under the rocks like we used to do in Nigeria. I recently read is it a post, a headliner that one, I'm trying to remember the name. I think they sell food, and they were able to gross about 2 point something billion on Chowdeck. It's an app in Nigeria. Fantastic headline. But you see, that's Nigeria. And that's because they had supporting infrastructure to achieve that. Technology is able to actually do, quantitative data collection to know exactly what the revenue, is. So if you look at that, right, that business, if you situate that kind of business abroad and you don't have the technological, or say the digital presence to actually, catalyze your marketing efforts, it might be a difficult, sell for you, because many of the people, again, connecting it back to consumer behavior, people would rather stay at home to order stuff online.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if you are not presenting the product in the right fashion, if you are not well positioned in terms of what your website looks like, what your e-commerce setup is the technology broken? Is there a customer service that is active? You know, those things that we don't do in Nigeria, we can't afford not to do them here. Otherwise, you might collapse under the weight of ignorance.
Yeah, and I like that you said that because like you said, sometimes you have a ready market, and so you see, sometimes businesses in certain countries, they don't really value customer satisfaction, right? Unlike in this part of the world where like customer satisfaction is very important, and that is why you see that a lot of businesses even go to the extra mile to send you surveys after you've visited them to see how they can improve on their services. Yeah, so I get what you're saying in that regard. So what would you say that I like you've talked about so many things, but just to wrap up this section, right? What would you say that for you for people that have now gotten into the country, they've started a business, but they are struggling to scale. How would you say they can start to scale? I mean, you've talked about so many things, marketing, digital presence, but is there anything else that you think especially for businesses that are struggling, what can they do to do better? And of course, increase their revenues?
There is no silver bullet to scaling other than making sure that all of the moving parts in the business are actually doing right. You know what I mean? So operations, your business accounts, as per what the numbers are saying, must be able to differentiate what the profit is actually accrued to the business is, and making sure that you're not eating your profits. All these are basic accounting knowledge that we should know. Many people just come from where they are coming from, and they land into all this into countries like US, UK, Canada, and then they are doing business the traditional way. I think that mind makeover needs to happen in order to make sure that they are not doing business as usual. Now, secondly, is of course, you had mentioned it, customer satisfaction. The posture of our minds towards customer service, put it that way. So, for example, I work in a business or in a company where we build infrastructures for governments, for private and whatnot. And there is something we usually do. It's called the service design. So the service design in this context is it takes into account the journey of any customer. So they label whoever is interacting with this infrastructure as a customer.
Yeah.
They take into account the journey of the customer from the genesis of actually getting to know that service up until the time the person makes use of that infrastructure or service. So it's a very robust calculation as to it takes into account the emotional components of all of this, the customer satisfaction part. So which is where I feel many of us, allow things to fall through the cracks. So I need to pay extra attention to that, because I feel that this is my personal recommendation. A billboard is not as effective as word of mouth. If people happen to have great experiences, even if you're under the rocks, there will be fingers pointing to that direction. So which is often one of the reasons why some businesses actually prosper and some others actually fail. So the numbers one, which is the crux, the bloodline of the business, which are the financials. Two, access to capital. Again, we've talked about, grants and whatnot. As a small business, you can leverage on those to those are good springboards for you to grow. And customer service, customer satisfaction. Of course, operations too is very key. Delivery, I spoke to a business person that doesn't know how to get a product from A to B. It was a challenge. We sort of walked through it, and thankfully she's on the other side now. So those are some of all these operational challenges too are there. You might want to spend more time to deal with it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Kolade. We still have a few more sessions, but I hope you all are learning. And if you have any questions for me or for Kolade, ask in the comment section. We'll be there to respond to your questions. Have a good day. Bye.